right? More people that don't believe that working harder is the solution, or shouting the system needs to change is the solution, but actually making changes themselves, actually being the change. When there are enough people who all agree this is what we need to do differently, that's the force. When there are enough people in leadership positions who say this is not good enough, this needs to change, that's the force I'm talking about. Hello, my beautiful friends. My name is Dr. Beck.
And I am Christine Barker, and this is Am I Doing It Wrong? A podcast for doctors by doctors. Dr. Beck is a mindset coach and medical doctor who specialises in liberating driven professional women from the limitations of perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and people pleasing. She's basically the cheat code for getting out of your own way, showing up authentically, and living a life you're proud of.
And Christine is a medical educator and nephrologist who creates resources for doctors in training that I truly think are an unfair advantage. She makes complex topics super simple and takes the pain and uncertainty out of passing your medical exams. Christine and I connected a few years ago via our online platforms, and over the years we've discussed countless highs, lows, and in-betweens of doctor life. And in doing so, we've experienced firsthand the power of vulnerable conversations to show us where we're getting in our own way and underestimating our capacity.
So we want you to be part of the conversation and experience these same results. Every week on the pod, we'll be bringing you conversations which shine light in dark places, normalise the doctor journey, ease unnecessary suffering, and give you actionable steps to thrive in all facets of your life. So grab a cuppa and get cozy for this week's episode of Am I Doing It Wrong? The podcast for doctors by doctors.
Hello, my beautiful friends, and welcome back to the podcast. We are absolutely delighted to hear from you guys since we have been able to release this podcast. We're so happy to see so many of you tuning in, and we are really grateful for everybody who's reached out so far and joined in the conversation with us. So from the bottom of my heart, I'm sure I can speak on both of our behalves. From the bottom of both of our hearts, we are so happy to be here with you, and we're so excited for what's to come. So hello, and hey Christine, how are you doing?
Hello, how are you? I'm so excited to hang out with you. I've been sort of having Beck withdrawals over the last week, just missing you. So, and I can't wait to hear everything that you've been up to, because I know that you were away, and then since you've come back you've been up to so many exciting things. So let us know, what have you been up to in the last little while?
Oh my gosh, guys, I don't know how she's having Beck withdrawals when I bombard her voice messages every day.
I'm addicted. I'm full on addicted.
I've just been back from honestly my absolute dream life. It's been a total dream these last few months. So for those of you guys who don't know, I have been away in Europe for the last 2.5 months. I got to live out my dream, my vision for this coaching work that I'm doing, where I was able to work from Madrid primarily, which was my home during probably about 2 months of that time. And I got to see all of my beautiful clients in a different time zone, and yeah, I feel so grateful and excited. Yeah, it was a total dream.
I was just thinking that time, location, freedom thing is something that, as a doctor who has a job and goes to clinic, I often fantasize about time, location, freedom, but it's just not compatible with all of the things that I want to be doing at the moment. So I just think it's a really special thing. And I know we're going to be talking about time stuff today, time management stuff. But I guess before we get into that, I was just curious as to how that was, like when you were, because it feels like maybe the grass is greener sometimes when you hear about people traveling and working, and like, what is it truly like to have that experience? Like when you're working overseas, and is it chaotic, or is it quite calm, or what's it like?
Yeah, oh, that's actually a beautiful thing to reflect on, because I am a big proponent of being very suspicious of the grass is greener mindset. It's so easy to fall into it. And as much as it was a dream, and I maintain that it was a dream, and it's going to stay in my vision as the ongoing dream, I mean, it doesn't come without its downsides too. You know, there's nothing, some people love living out of a suitcase. I I get tired of it after a while. So we were traveling for sort of a couple of weeks either side of that main block in Madrid, and I got really sick of dragging my suitcase around, of unpacking it and repacking it, and just not feeling like I had a home. When I got to Madrid, it felt like home just because I set up in this apartment for, I think it was about 6 weeks. So that was nice. But honestly, I was so happy to get home. I'm such a homebody, and I don't think there's any amount of glitz or glamour or seafood or whatever Spain can offer that is gonna take home away from me.
That's amazing though, that you at least you've got that in your mind, like how it feels to do that kind of living the dream, as you called it, and then how it feels to be home. And what a lovely feeling that when you are at home, you sort of realize that that's what you wanted all along, or that's what you want at least for now, and you're content. Because I feel like that kind of, yeah, that grass is greener thing happens to me, and then I get discontent. Like, do you ever find yourself, I'm probably just trying to escape from various parts of myself that, anyway, but do you ever find yourself sort of Googling on realestate.com and you're looking for a house like somewhere else? Like, you get no idea why you're doing that. Does anyone else do that? And you're trying to get a different life, and you're just typing in a house in Queensland or something. That'll do. Like, and it's not coming from a good place, so I do that not infrequently. And I guess it's really fun to hear at least that you've had a lovely coming home to yourself moment where you've just realised how beautiful Tasmania is and all the things. Yeah.
Yeah, my partner and I are guilty of that. Every time we go on a holiday somewhere, we're like, oh, we could live here.
Yeah. And having the lived in experience would appeal to me so much more than that traveling around thing, like you say. Like that 6 weeks block or something would be really cool, I think.
Yeah, I actually had now that I'm reflecting on this more, I had this towards the end when we were moving around Spain and doing the whole like hotel by hotel thing. I had this awful moment where I was actually late to one of my clients' appointments, and that was like the worst thing that could have happened to me in the world. So I just like scanning my mind for the downsides of things. You know, it's great to be spontaneous and have that time, location with freedom and but I think we're always going to have some level of commitment in the work that we do. I think it would be very rare to truly be like, I work whatever hours suit me, and I'm also doing fulfilling work that changes the world. But you know, there's probably many moments like that where very non-ideal things happened. And also, you know, I had one of those Instagram versus reality moments where I was like in the most beautiful beach scene I've ever seen before, but my internal reality was like in the boots, like I was in a bad place. And so I think that the grass is always greener thing very much applies, and I probably just need to take some more time to think about, you know, there's no place you arrive where everything's perfect. It was normal life in a different place.
Yeah, and wherever you go, there you are, isn't it? Also, but the other thing is the last poddy that we released, we were talking about the conference, and you were getting ready for the conference, and you were telling us about how you had put these beautiful like constraints in place and boundaries, and you were gonna you know, create this presentation. So you were telling us about that last time when I was having a little meltdown in Cairns. How did it go? Because it's happened now, yeah?
That's so funny you say that, because another thing that went wrong is my constraints that I so carefully put in place to prepare for that conference became more constrained because of other things that happened on the holidays. So I think I ended up having sort of 4 days to actually work on that conference presentation, and then I had to submit it. So look, if you just keep me talking for a while, I'll be able to tell you more and more things that went wrong in my glamorous overseas time.
At least I actually love the honesty, because there's nothing like, I guess, I'm sure if you talk to lots of people who have beautiful Instagram reels and actually got into the true honest experience, there's always things like that, isn't there? But it's quite nice to know about it.
Oh yeah, I think the reminder is really important, because it's so easy for even me, as somebody who works with these sort of tricks of the mind, I fall into this trap all the time of looking at somebody else's Instagram and being like, wow, wouldn't it be nice? Or that's the life, that's the solution. And it's like you said before, wherever you go, there you are. Wherever you go, you're still a human. Wherever you go, things will still go wrong.
Yes, they do go wrong. Did I tell you actually yesterday? We'll get back to you in a second, but let me tell you about my dramas yesterday. I was tired yesterday, Beck, and I was leaving the hospital car park and crashed slash dragged my car along a cement wall. That's my week. You've been around Madrid and doing all these things, and I have been sabotaging myself. Not deliberately, but just having clumsy little events like that. And by little events, I mean $5,000 worth of damage events. Whoops. So so that was my things going wrong. It's been a bit of a what went wrong with your life opening to the podcast today, but we've actually got a really awesome really nitty-gritty topic to get into. So I'm keen to sort of stop yabbering away and let you tell us all about what you wanted to bring to us today, which was on the themes of that conference. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, and first, guys, just let us know what's gone wrong in your week this week down below. Bring the humanity back into everybody's perfect Instagram reels, please. So actually last week I did have a genuinely super successful Instagram reel moment. I was so grateful to be selected to speak at WONCA. WONCA is the World Organization for General Practitioners. Don't ask me how that acronym doesn't add up. But Sydney was the host of this world conference this year. So I was tasked to give a workshop, a 90-minute workshop on fulfillment and work sustainability and and with that, being able to speak about some of the biggest challenges that we have for fulfillment and work sustainability every time.
I mean, this is going to make, do you know what's going to be super fun? I've been looking for like a little segment to put at the end of the podcast with just us having a blooper, and you just gave me a gift. Thank you so much. It's perfect.
Okay, well, when I do this, can you say that word for me, please? So I was tasked to do a talk on fulfillment and work
sustainability.
And with that, we need to talk about the issues that systemically make that challenging for us in medicine, which are burnout and moral injury. These topics are incredibly close to my heart, as is the flip side, the ultimate goal, which is fulfillment and work sustainability for doctors, because, oh my goodness, we need our doctors. And at the moment we are, if I may, we're abusing our doctors and we're taking advantage of them. We're trying to pull as much as we possibly can out of these brilliant, hardworking humans, and we're taking advantage of how hard they're willing to work to deliver great care to their patients. So this is an incredibly important topic, and I was so delighted that our room was booked out. People were in the room 20 minutes beforehand, waiting for it to start, and then we had to turn people away. People came up to me at the end and said, "Can you give me the cliff notes?" I missed it, they turned me away, I couldn't come. And honestly, this is what we need to see. We need to see this level of investment, unfortunately, by our doctors themselves, because as much as the system needs to change, and I will be the first person to shout that from the rooftop, the system isn't coming to save us. No one is coming to save us, not in any fast way. The system is changing slowly at best, and it's not good enough for us in the meantime. And so although it's no doctor's fault, and we shouldn't have to have this level of responsibility, and we shouldn't have to learn to adapt and change to this system that is taking advantage of us in the first place. It's all we can do, and we deserve to do it for ourselves when there is no other solution at this time for us. If the option is to stay burnt out and morally injured and unsatisfied and unfulfilled and exhausted by our work, or to turn to ourselves and do this work for ourselves as hard as it is, I want everyone to be looking at this option over here. And by doing that as well, we also become the kind of people who can build that tribe together and force the system to change. We need each other. I don't think it's going to be one or two unicorn doctors in the system who get to escape burnout and moral injury and their effects so that they're strong enough to go and change the system. I really think we need all of us to band together to be a big enough force to force this change on the system. So I've just gotten up on my podium again to give my passionate burnout speech, but I just can't say how much hope and conviction this kind of show out to this kind of session has given me in terms of our healthcare system ultimately changing. Because sometimes I feel alone. Sometimes I feel like there's not many of us, there's not enough of us who are audacious enough and invested enough in our own happiness and fulfillment to do this work. And again, not to anybody's fault, but I do feel alone sometimes. And this session's just made me see that those thoughts that I've had, they were wrong. There are tribes of people from over the world who are willing to do this difficult and different work to create something different for our system. So my heart is so big right now, and I'm so proud of everybody who showed up, and I'm so excited for the force that they're going to be with this kind of work in their hands.
But also, I just want to acknowledge that you did a really difficult thing, because when you're talking about that, the system versus the individual, I find that what I see online with that type of discussion is that everyone wants to blame the system and gang up on the system, and everyone gets behind that. And then it feels like when you talk about what we can do as individuals and then as a collective, as whole individuals that have worked on ourselves and how we can change the system, I think that is actually a more controversial place to go, because it gets sort of tarred with victim blaming and punishing these, like you say, these doctors that are working so hard and showing up every day in this system. And so I think it's a really important topic to hold both of those things at the same time. And I think you do that so beautifully, but in a massive platform like what you had there, a world conference, it must have felt a bit scary to talk about that. Yeah, so it's great that it was well received.
Yeah, no, and it feels brave. It feels like I'm speaking in a way that is against what is the accepted problem and solution here. And I get it. It's not surprising to me, and it's not something that I take personally. It's just a part of how our human brains work. We feel better when we create a villain. And this is a faceless villain, no less, where it's easy to spend a lot of time trying to shoot down the villain, blame the villain, and we get this sense of doing something when we point out the villain. We get a sense of perhaps righteousness and superiority. And guys, I'm not immune to these mindsets either. What I'm trying to say here is this is a very normal phenomenon for us as social creatures, and creatures that ultimately we just want to feel better. And so I think I've learned over the last couple of years of doing this work that as much as, it can be hard to have a different message, it's not surprising to me that other people have those thoughts and feel that way about blaming the system. And I can also see how they're right in so many ways. That is right, as you've said, in so many ways. And for me, the reason why I feel determined enough to speak up with a different opinion is because I truly believe that it is a solution that can help. I truly believe that the current blaming the system approach isn't only not helping people, but it's actually hurting us in so many ways, because as much as we get that strong feeling at first when we blame, then we also have to face, as you said, the fact that we put ourselves in this victim position. If it's all the system's fault, then nothing's in our control. If it's all the system's fault, then there's nothing we can do. We are powerless. And I don't believe that any doctor is powerless. And I definitely don't believe that as a united front, we are anything short of extremely powerful. And I think it's time for us to actually unite to force the change on the system after we've asked so nicely, please change. It's time for us to make ourselves stronger to be able to force that change.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess I'm curious to pick your brain on what you think is the main issue or interface, like the main problem that is to be solved, or the first thing to tackle. How did you discuss that at the conference? What were your ideas?
I think there's this funny association that happens with burnout. We when you think superficially about burnout, it often brings up these ideas of working very hard and then getting tired because you work so hard. You know, burnout, like the candle burned for so long until it ran out. The flame ran out because it worked so hard for so long. And there are more sophisticated ways that people talk about burnout, but I think it's important to notice that most of us think that burnout is a problem with working too hard and our workloads being too high, whether it's patient loads or the extra paperwork that's involved. But that's commonly what people think is a main problem that causes burnout. Doctors just have too much to do, whether it's too much to do in terms of time spent or, you know, the heavy intellectual work or the emotional labor that we do. And I don't think that makes sense. I don't think for doctors, people who have this proven track record of working their absolute butts off. This explanation for burnout makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to any doctor who knows themselves and knows their colleagues. It makes no sense to any spouse of a doctor that we've burnt out because we've worked too hard. We have so many examples in our lives of working extremely long hours and working extremely hard. You know, take yourself back to medical school when you could go to lectures all day, lab, clinical work, and then go home and study more and just do that on repeat. And after years and years of that work, I mean, there are many things that contributed to why we didn't burn out, but let's just consider that as a medical student, you perhaps had this thought maintaining your work that was, yes, this is hard, yes, this is a lot, but it's all worth it because I'm going to be a doctor, because I'm going to help people one day, right? So all of that hard work gets offset by the reward that you get back from it. And I should be careful with what I say. Not all of the hard work. We still need rest. We still need to balance the work we do physically, emotionally, cognitively, spiritually. We need to balance the work with equal rest. But what I'm saying is when you get rewarded by the work that you do, it's almost like the cost is lowered of that work. It's offsetting. One or the other are offsetting each other. This is something that I want to bring to our attention when it comes to burnout, that if we simplify burnout down to us working too hard and the workload's being too much, I think we're missing the point. And if we miss the point, then we're not going to get the right solution here. I think doctors are excellent at working hard. I think doctors are excellent at doing more. There's nothing ever stopped us or slowed us down from working hard. But instead, I think in our current healthcare system, we don't get rewarded in the way that we did back when we were a med student, and we don't get rewarded in a way that's equivalent to the work that we're putting in. We don't get to the end of our day and say, that was hard, but it was worth it. And that's ultimately because of our thoughts. But in our healthcare system, that limits our session times, limits our ability to see patients the way we want to see them, limits our ability to care for the patients at the standard that we want to care for them. That contributes in a big way to our lack of fulfillment and sense of accomplishment in our jobs. So, and it's also a part of the moral injury discussion. Moral injury is when we don't perceive that our basic standard of care has been met. And that is what creates the distress of moral injury, when we don't feel like we can give the patients the level of care that we think is good enough. So with all of that to say, I think a really important part of the burnout discussion that's not being had is making sure not just that we're doing reasonable workloads, but that we're actually spending our time on work that rewards us. And lots of things have to change in the system to be able to meet the standard of care that we think is morally good enough, acceptable. But this greater discussion that we were having at the Wonka conference was really having a hard look about how we're spending our time. Because again, hard work isn't the issue. The problem isn't that you're working too much. And also, this is not going to be solved by our old tactics of working harder, trying to squeeze more in and trying to do more. We need a different solution for this new problem that we're facing that has nothing to do with hard work or workloads.
I love that. And so it sounds like there's a solution. I'm on the edge of my seat. So I guess, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, because I can certainly, I'm sure you can as well, Beck. It really resonates that the hard work part is not the difficult part. I feel like we're all high achievers. We all put in hours. That is not the issue. And that moral injury thing about not giving patients time, it's actually so top of mind recently. So I've been finding that, like, recently I've been trying to work on getting out on time and sort of like, I guess, just working the hours I'm paid for, which I think is a challenge that doctors really could talk about more as well, and trying to keep it within those time limits instead of letting it blow out. And then I'm noticing that moral injury of feeling like I can't spend 40 minutes with every single patient, and you do have to, I guess you can't have both. And so, yeah, it is a really tricky situation. So I'm at a loss as to how one can fix that. So I would love to hear. So what was your solution? What did you recommend?
I just want to talk about that too, because that's such a common problem that comes up with my clients too. They have this very clear-cut problem, tangible problem of not being able to leave on time. And this is a part of why moral injury feeds burnout and the cycle viciously continues. It's that we have this morally injurious circumstance. It's not good enough for us. It's not good enough that we couldn't give the patient the care they wanted during the time that we allocated for the day. And so what we will do in this healthcare system that limits us is we will try to use our old tactics to fix it. We're going to try and work more, work harder, be more efficient, do more to solve this problem. And that feeds burnout because it's not the solution to the problem. It's not a problem with a lack of hard work. The problem here is that there wasn't enough time in the first place, or there wasn't enough resources in the healthcare system to be able to serve that patient in a way that was good enough for you. And so this is where coaching comes in, because I don't want to delude anybody into thinking that there is a beautiful, simple, crisp, win-win solution here. The truth is we do need to see changes in our system to be able to deliver the care to the same number of patients that we have. For example, longer appointment times or more efficient electronic healthcare systems that save us time and things like that. And so when you've isolated out for the things that are out of your control and the things that are in your control, that's when you get your power back, because we create more distress for ourselves that only hurts ourselves when we try and fight with these things that are out of our control. Say you have to meet, I have some American clients who they work in a different system that has different quotas and things like that. And so they might actually have a fixed number of patients that they have to see, and they cannot spend any more time with those patients unless it feeds into their free time. So they can't, one of the things that some doctors will decide is, well, you know what? I need longer appointment times. With who I am right now, with the level of clinical care I want to provide, I need longer appointment times. So I'm just going to make longer appointment times. I'm going to see less patients. I'm going to accept less money, or I'm going to charge more. And therefore, I'm going to solve my moral injury problem that way, or try to fix it to a certain extent that way by changing the situation. But for a lot of us, that's not A, possible, or B, a good solution. For a lot of us, cost of living makes it even hard for a doctor to live in a lot of these cases, and it's not possible for a doctor to accept less income, or even if it is possible, it's not necessarily something that they want to do. You know, a doctor is a person with a whole life. They have financial goals, they have things that they love, that they spend money on, whether it's their family or other things in their personal life. So I also worry about the shoulds that come up in competition with the moral injury. Well, if the problem is that, you know, I want to have longer appointment times to care for my patient, then I should just bear the brunt of that, have longer appointment times, accept less money, and then sacrifice other things in my life. This is a very complicated discussion, not just about medicine itself and the way you practice medicine, but it has to expand out into your whole life. So in any case, let's look over here and say that you cannot change any of your situation. This is where your thoughts come in, because if you cannot change the amount of resources you can give to your patient, and then you accept that no amount of working harder, no amount of optimizing your efficiency is going to take you from this not good enough standard of care to good enough. That's not going to change the situation as hard as you work. Then we are left to either continue to have these distressing thoughts about how our care is not good enough, or find a new way to think about the care that we give. And that is where coaching comes in, because that's not something that you can just ask yourself to do. Just have nicer thoughts. Just have non-distressing thoughts about this thing that's morally not okay to you. That takes a lot of self-exploration, a lot of strategic thinking as well about what you're creating and looking at the consequences of your thoughts. It takes a lot of self-awareness and emotional regulation to be able to even touch, let alone change those thoughts in a way that truly stays in your integrity and really serves you. So it was a very long-winded answer. Again, I'm so passionate about this work. I am so devastated that so many people believe that there is no solution available. And I hope I just prompted some of you to think about all the different things that are possible, from changing your circumstances to changing your thoughts, and therefore changing your level of distress so that you can show up to work, if you want to keep showing up to work, as the doctor that you are right now in this current healthcare system. But my point is that there are solutions. You're not stuck. You don't need to wait for the healthcare system to change. And in my opinion, you deserve to invest in making this change for yourself. You show up to this work every day or every week, and it's only going to accumulate in terms of cost if you don't change until you change.
Yeah. And can I just I guess I'm thinking about, because obviously for you, you're like a thought wizard, as I like to call you, but you are a mindset coach, and you get in there and can sort of unpack things and coach people and help them to think in a different way that makes them feel better. But I guess just based on what you just said, is it as simple as having a perspective shift, or is it more complicated than that? Because I guess that the sort of devil's advocate of that would be saying that we almost delude ourselves into thinking something different, which I know is not what you're saying, but I guess I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to that point.
Yes, that's so important. And the easy way to answer that is, yes, it is a perspective shift, but only one that is still in your integrity. So at the moment, your mind is interpreting the situation around you. It's offering you that initial thought that comes easily to your mind, and you accept that as true. And often with that, we believe that that is the only perspective that's true for us. That's the only thing that's true, full stop, end of story. But with my clients, when they start to explore their thoughts and open their mind, they find so naturally, when they give themselves the time of day, 10 different ways to think about this same situation, 10 different perspectives that came from them, not from me. I don't tell people what to think, but I just create a space where they actually question what they think. And so it's it is perspective shifting. It is ultimately reframing a situation, but only in the sense that it was incorrectly framed, falsely framed in the first place, if not blatantly. If not that we blatantly made a false interpretation and the thought that we had about the situation was just wrong in the first place. If not that, then at least usually in some ways it's not completely true. And as you always say, what's also true is ... So as much as when we talk about it, it sounds like we're just deluding ourselves and swapping thoughts. I never ask my clients to do that in a way that's not in their integrity. If we are in a session, for example, I just had a session with one of my clients before who works in obstetrics and gynecology. She faces the devastating situation of having to do late-term abortions, for example. And to her, that's something that is morally very difficult. It's also a necessary part of her job in the healthcare system that she works in. So we're not trying to make her feel happy about that situation. That's not the goal there. But part of this work is recognizing when she has these particular thoughts about this situation. We know what she's creating. It's a lot of pain. It's a lot of suffering. It's more suffering and challenge for herself. And if she has decided, like many doctors decide they're going to keep showing up to this healthcare system that's morally injurious for them, where they can't provide the level of care they want. If we are deciding we're going to keep showing up to that situation, do I want to keep having this thought, knowing what it creates for me? And when you really sit with that for yourself, when you really realize that A, this is hurting me, B, it's not helping anything, it's not furthering the change that I want to see, then usually, and C, there are other perspectives I can take that don't hurt me as much and might actually help me show up as more of the person I want to be. That's quite a complicated list there, but when we lead people through that, this change in thoughts comes quite naturally. It's not ever something that we force. I don't often have to ask my patients to practice a thought, for example. It's the stuff they already knew that they'd forgotten. It's the other interpretations of that situation that were more quiet. So long answer to a very important question. Yes, we're changing perspectives, but only in a way that's genuine.
Yeah, to a different truth. Yeah, it's just like changing the angle at which you're looking at the same situation. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I guess I'd love to come back and pick your brain on, because I know that you have a really unique take on this, so I just want to make sure that we get all this juicy information out of you today, is the time management perspective. So we've already sort of touched on how it's hard to leave work on time, and then it's hard to sort of manage your time in clinic, but also I think that time, to me, it feels like, doctors are usually remunerated enough that time is probably our most precious asset. And I think as well as that, it's hard to have control over it in some way. Like, you can go to work and earn money, but but time is just something I find hard to tap into, Beck. And so I wondered, do you have any strategies for that aspect of doctor life?
Yes, this is so much of what we spoke about at Wonka, because I used to have the worst relationship with time ever. And I still have remnants of this bad relationship with time that I'm constantly trying to clean up. I was just telling Christine about how yesterday I kept finding myself shifting things in my calendar this week from Monday to Tuesday, then from Tuesday to Wednesday, then from Wednesday to Thursday. I think up at this point, it's Wednesday night. I've got enough in my calendar to fill the week now. So it's about 2 days out in terms of things I wanted to do. But this time management is so important, because when we are in denial about how much time we have. We make bad decisions about what we spend our time on. And this comes back to our conversation about burnout that we're having now, because burnout is in part about how we spend our time at work, but what's also involved is how we spend our time outside of work too. And in a time where our healthcare system makes it challenging to get a lot of fulfillment from work, short of changing our thoughts, or as well as changing our thoughts about work, we can look to get that fulfillment, get our fulfillment cups filled up from outside of work. And that might be the best thing we can do, the most productive thing we can do for ourselves in terms of improving our burnout situation at the moment. So in Wonka, we had a bit of a challenging moment where I had the people in the room do this same exercise that I forced myself to do when I realized I had this problem with what I call fantasy planning. So fantasy planning is when, for example, I finish my clinical work at 5 p.m. So I then go to bed at 10 p.m. So I look at my calendar and I think, great, when I finish work today, I have got 5 hours free. I've got 5 hours to myself. I am going to start 2 sports. I'm going to learn a new language, and I'm going to start that business, that side hustle that everybody's talking about. 5 hours every day, 5 days a week. I've got plenty of time, right? Now, fantasy planning. This was my fantasy. What would actually happen was I finish work probably at 5:30. Hello, overworking, trying to compensate, moral injury, not doing enough for my patients. 5:30, say, was maybe the average, and perhaps later, even when I was a resident. I think I was even worse at leaving on time. It would take me an hour to transit home. So I had to, I'm on the 8th floor of the hospital. I have to walk to my car, 10 minutes, gone. Driving back through the traffic in Melbourne, pending no car accidents, which happened about once a week, it'll take me an hour to get home. Then it'll probably take me another 10 minutes to get out of my car, get my stuff, get settled, get a glass of water. And what time does that bring me to? This is going to show my decommissioned arithmetic. Let's say it's 6:30 by now.
Yeah, sounds right.
So to start off with, my free time doesn't start from 5. My free time starts from 6:30. And then what I wanted everybody to face in this planning situation as well is that transit's just one example of the prerequisite things that we need to do for life. And this is an exercise that I call, or these are tasks that I call the cost of living. So when I ask people to do the cost of living exercise, I ask you to put the things in your calendar that are your prerequisites for life, the things that you need to do to stay alive and be a socially functioning human. So these include sleep. My partner always laughs at me for having sleep in my calendar. He's like, is that really necessary? That's super weird. But when I had this fantasy planning problem, I didn't just think that I had till 10 p.m. I thought, I'd look at my calendar, I'm like, I've got 7 hours till, my calendar shows me till midnight, I've got 7 hours to play with. And that was messing with my ability to plan well. So I put in sleep, like this bed bookend. Then other things in the cost of living are food-related items. You have to feed yourself. So another thing I had to put into my post 5 p.m. time every night was about an hour just for dinner, right? I'm talking preparing dinner, eating dinner, and then cleaning up after dinner. It probably takes me about an hour if I'm honest with myself. Then just person-related activities. So I didn't even include my mornings in this fantasy planning example because most of my morning time is already taken up. I wake up, I walk my dog, I dress myself, I eat again, and I have a bit of a morning routine. My morning time is pre-allocated. So I want people to think about these activities in their life that are non-negotiable. They take up some of our time. When we ignore these things, and there's more on that cost of living list, it's a full exercise to do, But when we ignore these activities, we are fantasy planning. When we think that that time is truly free, we are in a fantasy. We're in denial of how much time we actually have. So that's the first thing that I want people to do with their time. Before we go and make grand plans or make decisions about what we want to add in or change, I want people to meet the often harsh reality of how much free time, flexible time you actually have to make decisions about. And when you do that, when you're willing to do that work, now we're ready to have a conversation about how you spend your time.
Wow. Do you know what? I resonate so much with the fantasy planning, but what I realized when you were saying that is that I've actually become the type of person who, because of failed fantasy planning in the past and being disappointed, now I don't plan anything. Like in my free time, like in my work time, I know when I'm supposed to be at clinic and in meetings and stuff like that. But in my free time, I actually don't calendarize anything because I can't cope emotionally with it all falling apart. But it must have all fallen apart because of fantasy planning, which I didn't really have insight into, and you're kind of blowing my mind. Okay. As usual.
That was my exact problem. And even this week, as I'm doing it myself this week, I know why I'm doing it. It's because I suddenly had extra things come on my plate that I hadn't planned for, and I wanted to get them done fast. I also already had a bit of a to-do list that I wanted to get done this week. And when it came time to map out what I was doing, I calendar block and what I was going to spend my time on this week, I was in denial about, I just didn't want to see that my whole week was already taken up, and perhaps some things would actually have to move to next week. I didn't want to face that reality, and so I did this sneaky little thing in my head where I'm like, oh, it's only going to take that much time. I don't need a break, da-da-da-da. I'm going to do all of this on Monday. And it made me feel better in the moment. It helped me escape that harsh, hurtful reality that this week is totally full and some of this stuff isn't going to get done this week. It's going to get done at best next week. And that's really hard for us to face.
Yeah, and that word denial there's a fantasy planning and then there's the denial. It's true. There is such a denial and such a lack of insight as to how much we as people and doctors can get done in a day and how long a day is. And
actually, I did something with this insight and this breaking of denial today when I was like, Monday, out the window. Well and truly overplanned. Tuesday, still like fighting for that fantasy, fighting for it. But getting to the end of yesterday, I met the reality. I was there. I recognized that what I was doing wasn't working and it was only hurting me and creating more stress and disappointment. So today, I actually planned to have a walk, a 1 hour break in the morning. It was before lunchtime. I think it was sort of 11 a.m. or something like that, after I finished one of my biggest, most challenging tasks. And I was so much better for it in the next time block to come. And I feel like we need to relearn this lesson over and over and over again. I used to try and skip my lunch breaks, not even because I wanted to. I used to skip my lunch breaks as a registrar. Certainly as a junior registrar, I used to skip my lunch breaks all the time, and I'd justify this needs to be done first. If I just do this quickly, then I can relax. If this really needs to be done before my lunch break, it can't be done at 3 p.m. or whatever. And the problem was, I believe if I went back and did the calculations, the day would smooth out to be probably only as productive either way, whether I took that 1 hour break or not. And it's because our brains need that on-off button. We think that we're going to get more done if we just keep working. But what's actually true a lot of the time, if you're willing to face it, is if you have a break, you're going to be more efficient and you're probably going to get more done in the big picture. And so that was another key part that I encouraged people to think about what goes in that time between 5 to 10 p.m. I used to plan to go home and study. Especially when I was a BPT, I am super nerdy, guys, and I actually really wanted to study. I really enjoy studying. And despite my determination to study, despite the fact that I actually enjoy studying for the most part, it didn't matter how hard I worked, how enthusiastic I was. If I tried to work in that first hour, before letting myself unplug and plug back in, or do something that unhooked my brain, that unfocused my brain, that let me drop that level of vigilance that I had throughout my day, it just wouldn't be efficient. And so default or fundamental things that I think everybody can think about today when they think about where their time goes just in a post-work period, transit is one that all of us have to a certain extent. Think about the time it even takes for you to pack up your stuff at the end of your day and get yourself to your car. That might be 10 minutes there. Then there's the transit, then there's getting yourself inside until you're truly free. Food related items and also getting yourself undressed, changed to different clothes, showered, that's more time every single day you spend. And finally, if you have plans to work, to do something that's focused or challenging during your time after a clinical day, and guys, I say, even if you want to call it an easy clinical day, even if it was all, stuff that didn't intellectually challenge you, you got everything in the bag, you still had to be vigilant all day. You still had to be engaged. Your brain was focused all day. And I want you guys to reflect on, do I need time to unplug and plug back in before I am able to do that focused work? Will I be more efficient if I unplug and plug back in? Because for me, I ended up allocating an hour. I would not let myself start attempting to do any study or any work until I'd had an hour of switch off time. And remember, this was me, somebody who was very dedicated and diligent to studying and learning and also excited to do it. And that's the time that I needed, even with all of those things going for me in this case. Let alone how difficult it is when you don't want to study and you're exhausted and it's the last thing you want to do.
There's so much in what you're saying, because what I keep hearing when you're talking about that is not only that, I guess, being honest with yourself about your time and how you will actually be in that energy and at that time, like just getting home from work, how you're going to be, and then also how your nervous system is. Because I feel like with the lunch example, I was the same as you. I always thought if I skip lunch, I'll leave on time. That never ever happened. My ability to leave on time was not enhanced by starvation. It was definitely not. And then my afternoon, I'd be more agitated. And then what would happen is I had planned to have lunch at 3 or whenever. And then the consultant would come for a ward round. And then all of a sudden I've got to be on and I am not on and I'm hypoglycemic. And and so by the time I get to when I'm supposed to be leaving, my nervous system is truly in some kind of fight or flight because I'm now literally starving. My body's what's happening? Where is the vending machine? But then it's I guess to get yourself back into parasympathetic eating, right? Rest and digest. It's if we really think about what we're doing to ourselves by not having lunch, you're that resetting thing, it's physiological as well. And as doctors, obviously, that sciencey side of us might sort of benefit from having that explained to us, that it actually does literally reset your nervous system, having lunch or having dinner when you get home and allowing yourself to unplug. It's actually doing something to your brain and your nervous system. Yeah.
I could not agree more. And it's just this thought error that perpetuates it, which is the thoughts of, if I just do this one more thing, if I just the thought error that you found, which is, if I keep working now, I'll be able to go home on time. How often is that actually true? How often is it true that if you do this one more thing, that makes the whole day better? As opposed to, if we flip that to, if I do this one different thing, have lunch, that might actually make your whole day better. So we just are misinterpreting the situation. We're working on misinterpretations, misconceptions of what actually is productive for us. We're not even talking about being nice to yourself right now, right? We're talking about what's productive.
And at every stage of what you've talked about, from the, I guess, that feeling of, the problem not being working hard, but the problem being aspects of moral injury not being fulfilled, into the time management, into that lack of awareness or disregard for our physiological settings. It all comes back to what you're saying, is we're sort of spiraling in our heads, whether we're conscious of it or not. There's some pattern of thought, there's something we're doing that's an internal narrative at all of those different steps.
Yeah, for doctors, it's just working harder solves the problem. Working harder solves the problem. That's our narrative. That's what we think. That's what even my client today was coming up with. She said, it's my fault because if I just worked harder, if I just had more experience, then I would be better and I wouldn't need supervision and I could create better outcomes for my patients. No. Wait a second. Working harder can't always be the solution, but it's always the one that we reach for, whether it's from lunch breaks to solving for moral injury and burnout. And that's probably the most important takeaway from this session, to just look into your mind and question, do I think that working harder is the solution to all of my problems? When I see that I have limited time, when I go through this cost of living exercise and I see I've only got that much time, is your next thought, well, I better work harder, I better be more efficient, I better squeeze more in? Because the solution I want for you guys to be is to look at what actually creates fulfillment, i.e., I mean, that can be a bit of a fluffy word, but I'm just asking, what's meaningful for you? What results, what outcomes would make you feel proud of yourself, would make you feel satisfied with your day or satisfied with your work over the next 3 years? What would actually make you feel content with how you have spent your time and energy? And then to reverse engineer that into the very limited number of extra hours that you actually have in your week. You don't have much time. You cannot afford to be spending your time on things that don't create fulfillment, because you need that reward in your life or you're gonna get burnt out. You can't keep working for nothing. It doesn't make sense to your brain. Your brain's just gonna rebel.
And I guess, I mean, that is just so beautiful, and the way that all comes together is poetic. You're so amazing at conceptualizing these things, and it's a very unique take on the whole thing. So thank you so much for this conversation. And I guess I'm just thinking about, with all that being said, and it's so true, like finding what you're saying and finding that thing that you feel fulfilling when you're in this system. Or, you know, are you suggesting we find fulfillment at work or outside of work or both? Or are you, I guess, how do we actually action that step? Because I think that's a hard thing to do.
Absolutely. And this is where I really want us to also not be in denial of the limitations of the healthcare system. It's not helpful to be delusional and think that we can go and provide the level of care to our patients tomorrow with the current healthcare system, and that's how we're going to get our level of fulfillment. That's how we're going to get our fulfillment. So instead of needing it to be absolute and perfect, which I maintain that we should strive towards. I think if we don't strive towards it being really great, we're not even going to come close. What's that saying? Reach for the stars and you'll fall to the moon, or I think the moon.
Yeah. Oh God,
Reach for the moon and you'll fall to the stars. This would be so embarrassing for my aerospace engineer partner. Which one's higher?
I feel like I can't retrieve it for you, Beck. Sorry. I'm gonna like aim high, shoot low, but I know there is one about stars and moons. There is. Sorry.
Aim high, and then you'll still fall somewhere. You know, aim really high and you'll still fall high. Let's just. But we need to maintain, and this is where you have to be really careful with your thoughts, because as much as we're saying the system is not the only problem or not the only solution, you are not the only solution either. This isn't just about changing yourself to fit into a broken system. That's not what we want you to do, and that's a common way that people misinterpret this work. They're like, so you're asking me to adapt to a terrible system? No. I'm asking you to protect yourself and stay in your integrity and create as much happiness and fulfillment as you can in, yes, I will agree, a broken system. I'll give you that. So when we can be really realistic about the limitations here, then we can say, all right, well, I'm not going to get total joy and total fulfillment from my time in the hospital or in my clinic. That's not available to me. But where can I get some fulfillment? And honestly, it's okay if the answer right now for you is no. if you don't have that ability to either recognize natural situations that are fulfilling to you, that do make you feel proud and do make you feel like you're making a difference, whatever is meaningful to you, if you can't find them right now, that's okay. And that's a part of burnout, that it's hard for you to get out of that pessimistic perspective. So that's okay. And for those of you who can, for those of you who do have some malleability in your thoughts, you might be able to look at these situations that you have, just a standard Tuesday in your life, and you might already be able to look at it from a different perspective and be like, wow, I really made a difference to that patient. I've actually been ignoring how significant that difference is that I made, because I was only like, if it's 100%, that's all that matters. But you're actually not happy with the 80% that you gave, the 80% change that you made. And maybe in your value system, there is some room for you to recognize that. Again, it's okay if that's not the case for you. If that's not something that actually genuinely makes you feel different, then don't try and use it. Then outside of work, this is where you really need to use your time outside of work. If you can't see your situation differently, if you can't pick up on any places of fulfillment, or if you can't shift your perspective in a way that helps you see the difference that you're making or whatever is meaningful for you, then you need to really be diligent with your time outside of work. Because if work is not something that can provide anything back to you, then the rest of your life has to, or you will crash. Something in your life needs to be giving back to you. And it might be simply paying more attention to the good things in your life right now. But it might be that you really do need to look at how you're spending your time. If you've only got 2 hours truly free of an evening, 5 days a week, you've got 10 hours total in a week to do something that creates a result of fulfillment for you, then you're going to need to be very discerning with what you put in those hours, because you can't afford to put in stuff that doesn't give back to you, not if your work doesn't give back to you.
Throughout, you've been mentioning all these little tools that you gave at the conference, and you gave exercises and things. Is there any way we could get a hold of that? Sorry, I mean, it's a bit cheeky. I wasn't at the conference, but I'm like, sounds like pure gold in a basket. Can we get our hands on that?
And I think this is really important work for everybody, and everybody at the workshop really enjoyed it. There was like a 75% sign up rate to do the work, to take this work further. So I think we've touched on something that's really important for doctors at the moment, and I would love to make that available. So if you would like to be prompted with some of these exercises, because as you've heard from what we talked about, it is very complicated. There are multiple steps in this system, and then there's also multiple ways that your brain is going to come up against you when you try and make these changes. So if you want to, I'll add a link below, and that will be an opportunity for you to put your name on a list for me, and then I will deliver to you this workshop in its abbreviated form. So I'll make a abbreviated cliff notes of the workshop, and then from that as well, my GPs who came, they're receiving an email sequence at the moment that helps them take this work even further and actually implement it in their lives, because coaching isn't just teaching. We teach in coaching in order to provide some structure and direction, but the real work of coaching it's when you go to do this work and then your brain comes up against you. Your brain gets in your way. You know, for example, when you go to do this cost of living exercise that I'm talking about, you might start to do it, and then once you put a couple of things in, that thing happens where you're like, this feels terrible. I would like to go back into denial right now. And you just close your laptop and you're like, I'll do it tomorrow. So coaching is about not just telling you like this, not just, suggesting that you go through this exercise, but the real coaching comes in how you get in your own way, how you pulling that handbrake up that stops you from making the change that you just told me that you want to make. And let's support you and your human brain to actually get you what you want. Let's take the handbrakes off. Let's get these barriers out of your way. So I would be absolutely honored to give you some cliff notes from this highly impactful workshop, and to give you that email follow-up to make sure you really implement this work.
Yeah, that sounds literally amazing. That sounds so good because yeah, it feels like after this conversation, I'm itching to try some of those things you've mentioned. So that would be phenomenal. So thank you. That's very generous of you. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, so definitely we'll leave a link below for people to jump on that as soon as possible. And do you have any other, I feel like we've packed a lot into this, but do you have any other I guess words of wisdom for the doctors who are listening to this who are, you know, just feeling like they are, you know, there's moral injury, there's I don't have any time. Like what would your sort of key message be for them?
Yeah. Just to start with, you're not alone. You know, there are so many of us who are suffering in silence rather than out loud. We started this episode talking about the Instagram reel. Nobody's putting their burnout or moral injury on their Instagram reels, right? So I think the first thing to know is it is a systematic issue. We do work in a healthcare system that systematically causes burnout and moral injury. This is not a you problem. And what we're offering here is that when you're ready, if there comes a time that you want to do something different or feel different or be different, there's also something that you can do to help you. And this works. It is work, but it's not the same type of work that you're used to. It's not working harder. It's working smarter. It's doing that more intellectual, vulnerable, authentic, honest work. It's changing you in a way that it isn't harder because it's bringing you back to your integrity. So it's not your fault, but when you're ready, there are things you can do to support yourself.
Yeah, and I guess just to add to that is the way I sort of see this on top of what you've said is that one day that same person that's having that struggle right now, you're going to be a leader. And when you're a leader, you get to make change so much more easily. In my current position as a consultant, I get to do lots of things that I don't have to ask anyone about, and it's all on a micro level, like you're doing it with the immediate people around you, but you get to lead and you get to make change just because you're in that position. And if you're if you've gone through that journey of what Beck's talking about, I think you'll be the ideal person to make the change. Like, it's actually beautiful. Like, if I could just imagine a lot of people listening to this, and there's like a tribe of people who are, I guess, have the potential to do so much. So even if you are sitting there sort of thinking, oh, really, it is the system, this is still the way to affect the system, is to start with yourself and get your cup full enough, or, you know, survive long enough in this career that you can make an impact down the track.
I can't imagine if one day, years later, our hospital system changed in the way that all of the consultants had that level of insight and intentionality, self-awareness, emotional regulation, and that bigger vision for changing healthcare. And that's what I'm talking about here. You know, we actually have the ability to make these changes, right? More people that don't believe that working harder is the solution, or shouting the system needs to change is the solution, but actually making changes themselves, actually being the change. When there are enough people who all agree this is what we need to do differently, that's the force. When there are enough people in leadership positions who say this is not good enough, this needs to change, that's the force I'm talking about.
I do really believe that what you're saying is a message worth spreading. Like, it's like TED Talk worthy. It's and that's not just because I'm your friend. That's not, like, I genuinely feel that it's a unique take. And this thought work coming into burnout and the interface between that is not something that is broadcast widely. And I think it's for those people who resonate with it, it's worth sharing. Yep, so thank you for all the work you do, and thank you so much for those freebies. I cannot wait. Yeah, so did you have anything else to sort of give these guys?
No, I'm so excited. I was just so excited to see this enormous group of people who are ready to do this work, and I guess that just goes along the same lines of you're not alone. There are a lot of people in the same battle, and there are a lot of people willing to try something different now in order to live the life they want. So come and join us. We are so grateful for you guys joining us today on another episode of our potty, and we love the comments coming in, so please keep them coming. Tell us what you want to hear more about. Christine is a wealth of knowledge, and and we want to make sure that we're really targeting to the stuff that you want to hear.
Yeah, and tell us if you disagree with us. We would also love to hear that. That is most welcome. All dialogues are welcome. And thank you so much for listening. We have been having so much fun putting this podcast together and just getting to connect with you guys. And it is just our absolute privilege. So thank you so much for being here. Yeah, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
I've been waiting all my life for something. I've been down the darkest roads and up in the clouds. But I've always felt that something's missing. That was until I found you right there